And I've always been a less is more kind of person. My bias, of course, would say if you just work with Altruist, we sort of solve that problem for you. One could use Altruist and have custody, portfolio management and accounting, trading, rebalancing, performance reporting, client mobile app, fee billing. It's all just done, right? They didn't have to do a whole lot of thinking, and it's way more efficient, costs less, unified. And then with AI, right, they can just plug into Hazel. Hazel's deeply integrated into the Altruist custodial data. So kind of N of one, kind of feature for an AI product.
Welcome back to another episode of The Advisor Journey. I'm your host, Desarte Yarnway. Today, you are in for a special treat. We saved this one because this is the one you're going to want to listen to all the way through. We got the man, the myth, the legend, my partner in wealth, Jason Wenk. Jason, how you doing?
It's been a long time since I heard that. My partner in wealth. Fun to be back.
Fun to be back. So, Jason, it's the end of the year, right? A lot of stuff happened. As you know, advisors are business planning at this time. And for many advisors, the year has gone how they anticipated it to go. For some advisors, they learned many lessons. They have identified what their opportunity is for next year, and they're ready to meet all their goals. So I wanted to invite you on the podcast, one, to just talk about sort of the state of the market for advisors, what they should be considering, talk about the state of technology, because advisors are looking for the best tools that will make them more efficient. And then let's talk a little bit about Altruist, our roadmap, and what advisors should expect. But before we do that, how you been? What's going on in your world?
Well, people are going to be like, hey, did Jason take a 5-year break? Because he looks 5 years older than he did
Not at all.
6 months ago. No, it's been a very busy year. Life's generally good. So been working a lot. I feel pretty energized. The interesting part for me is I just recently hit 7 years of being at Altruist. So that makes this the longest job I've ever had in my life.
Congrats.
Yeah, I know. And what I'll say that's what I'm really encouraged by is like I genuinely jump out of bed excited to go to work. I mean, I have a hard time sleeping because I have a hard time not thinking about like what we're doing here and kind of all of the, things that, are getting released soon or plans for next year. So I think most people, if they can find work that fills, that's just like a very hard thing to find. And I know when I hit around this same stage, my last two companies, not even because I didn't make it this long, but when I hit like 5 or 6 years, I was already feeling burned out. Mm-hmm. And kind of like ready for the next thing. And here I'm like, there's just so much to do, and I'm super excited about it.
Well, I'm sure the advisors really enjoy hearing that. But there probably is an advisor that feels burnt out after this year, right? What advice could you give them going into next year on how to sort of take care of yourself? I'm sure you've probably done something different in this business than you might not have done in your past businesses, right? What can they do next year so they can run the race?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, the older I get, the more I do spend a bit more time on self-care, I guess. Just realizing that, you start to really feel your mortality in your 40s. So you still got a ways to go. I mean, all the football, maybe your body feels like a 40-year-old's body already. I don't know. But ironically, those things I think are important, like in general. So if people are preparing for a new year, it's a good time to make some of those new commitments, take care of oneself. Like it's important. But from a business perspective, look, the thing I find most fascinating about the wealth business right now and advisors is, I'm not sure many realize how easy they've had it the past 5 to 10 years. It's been, just like a ripping bull market. You have all these demographic trends that have actually made tons of money in motion. So you think about the things that happen that actually make client acquisition easier. It's almost always a money in motion event. So you have the largest generation in the world, in America, I should say, the baby boomers who've been retiring, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of them per day for the last, decade. Mm-hmm. So getting rollover or retirement money has been the easiest it's probably ever been, in the last 100 years. And that largely is the first generation that spent their entire working life with 401k plans. So they actually have liquid investable assets, whereas prior generations were mostly pensions, things like that, right? That same generation, that same demographic, were also the largest number of business owners in America. And so now you have the largest amount of businesses being sold that have ever been happening. You've also had some of the most capital flow into startups and sort of like venture and private equity. So there's been more private capital-backed companies than any time in all of history, which means there's a ton of people out there, employees of startups, tech companies like Altruist, where the employees have ISOs and RSUs, right? So in other words, they have assets that require financial planning help. So in other words, you've had like all these things that have happened outside of their control that have been massive tailwinds for kind of people creating liquid wealth and having access to it. This has also happened again on the back of like just a ripping, 15 plus year effectively, cyclical bull market. There's been some corrections, but basically from 2010 to today, there's been very little correction. It's been a very, very strong market. And most advisors are charging asset-based fees. And so, these accounts have gotten bigger. Their revenue, of course, has then gone up accordingly. And the big thing, I guess, it's not to be like a doom and gloom, but I was reading one of these Kitsis reports recently, and it was about advisor profitability. And he made the comment that most firms have something in the neighborhood of like a 30% kind of EBIT margin before owner's compensation. And when I saw that, what's interesting is the first comment I saw in the post was from Matthew Jarvis.
There he is.
Who,
alumni of this show.
Yeah. And Jarvis said something which I'm like, man, that was really smart that he put that in. He's like, if you're running at 30% profit margin in this type of market, you are one bear market from being wiped out as an advisor. Because all it takes is a 20, 30% reduction in fees. And again, if you're only at a 30% margin, let's do some really simple math for everybody. Just keep it really simple. If your revenue was $100,000 and you were earning $30,000 of profit, you had $70,000 of probably fixed expenses. If the market drops 20% and now your revenue is $80,000, your expenses don't change. You've now got $10,000 of profits, right? And just multiply how much scale you have as a business. So I think it's one of these things where the market's been so easy and frothy. It's allowed a lot of people to be pretty average, even maybe below average business people. Mm-hmm. And so when I think of the state of like the wealth space, the wealth markets, all of that froth has created a ton of people that want to sell products to advisors. So asset management products, technology products, consulting products, events, right? Like a ton of things, people reaching into that, like, very expanding, pool of revenue. And so, yeah, I don't know that 2026 is the year, but look, eventually there'll be a day of reckoning. The music will stop. And all of the very easy money sort of that was made in wealth management the last 15 years, including like all the easy M&A, like there's been all sorts of stuff, like everything good and easy that could happen has pretty much all happened at the same time. And I'm not sure that advisors are looking at it that way and thinking like, I think many actually have fooled themselves into believing that they are incredibly successful, good, smart entrepreneurs. Yeah. It's like, hey, like maybe they are, maybe some of them are, but we all look a lot smarter when the tide rises. And as Warren Buffett says, you find out who's swimming
naked,
no shorts when the tide goes down, right? So
absolutely,
I think that's probably what I'd say thematically as I go into the next year. I'm like, I just keep wondering how many more years of this, like just kind of easy market, easy way to build and grow a wealth business.
Absolutely. And naturally, you answered my question about the state of markets. For the advisor that maybe has been riding this easy wave, right? Looking into 2026, what do you recommend that they do so they're not caught with their pants, right? When the tide goes down, for lack of better words, because it's easy when things are going well, and you don't realize what you've been doing until it's not. So what is sort of your advice, or what would you do being an advisor right now? Like, hey, you know what? I have been sort of just taking my time, maybe procrastinating, maybe not going as hard as I could have been going. Now's the time to change that. What do you do?
I just said how easy it's been. And I want to first recognize that there's probably a lot of advisors out there that are like, this has been incredibly hard.
Right.
It's like, so if it's been hard in this market, like just imagine how hard it's going to be if the market changes, the dynamics change, right? And again, some of these things are cyclical because they're tied to demographics. And so it might be a decade before like the sort of boomer opportunity kind of, runs its course. And the market will contract because Gen X is just not as big as boomers. 20 years after that, the millennials will be retirement age, and that's a huge generation, right? So these are cycles, right? But I definitely want to acknowledge, like, if it's been hard, look, it's always hard because it's just the easiest of the hard it's ever been.
For sure.
Lately.
For sure. Agreed.
It's never a bad idea to drive or strive for operational excellence as an advisor. So, people hear me sometimes, I probably sound like the old man yelling at the clouds, but I'm like, less tech vendors is better than more tech vendors.
Agreed.
Simplicity scales, like that's better than complexity. Focus on one thing and do it excellently, right? Versus like scattering your efforts across 10 or something odd different, efforts. So these are all things that, like, I would say they're not necessarily unique to this very time. They're the same things I've been telling people for years. It's just, I think some folks will, view that like a list of things to be focused on and doing as kind of irrelevant when they're like, look, I'm making tons of money and the business is easy and I'm growing. Why would I do all that stuff you're talking about? And it's like, well, again, sometimes it's not so easy, and you'll be really glad when you have that really efficient, very highly automated, like lean stack of technology and tools, really efficient, kind of ability to serve clients. So I think those are some things. Other things that are kind of interesting, this is a little bit of recency bias, but I met a firm recently and they were explaining a little bit about how they run. And I just, was blown away by the way they do things. And I was like, man, these people are so smart. Like how they built their business was so impressive. But a few of the things they did, which I thought were really fascinating. One was they limit each advisor at the firm to 40 clients. But when they bring a new advisor in, they seed them with 20. One is it creates a lot of discipline from the advisor's perspective that, hey, I only get to have 40 clients. So, I better make sure that they're 40 very good clients. I'm charging the right amount of fees. But what's really fascinating is once they've reached their cap, like they can't serve more than 40, they actually get paid on the clients they refer to other advisors that have yet to hit their cap of 40. Wow. Now, this might all sound really crazy until you realize that this firm has $12 billion of assets under management. It's all organic, and they're growing at like 15% CAGR organically, not including market, just like net new asset flows. And they have 100 CFPs now on staff. And basically, their talent pool, when I look at their team, it's a ton of really, really smart young advisors. They have one of like the most deep benches of young CFPs I've seen in the industry. And it's because they've created this really interesting kind of flywheel where, once you're full, you're still motivated to help the next person in line kind of grow. So you become part of what seeds them with their first 20 clients. And then their model is basically like, once you have 20 and you take really good care of those 20 clients, and they're obviously these are not like low net worth clients. If you have that limited number, probably every client's paying tens of thousands of dollars.
Sure.
So, you kind of have this like really interesting like servant mentality. All of that growth comes from just referrals, right? So it's a really fascinating model. The other thing they did that I thought was really interesting was that they build on the client's entire net worth. So they were like, look, a lot of people do all sorts of strange billing. We kept it pretty simple. They basically had, I'll kind of butcher it a little bit, but like sort of a minimum fee, and it applied to an entire net worth. And then they did a lot of things. This is partly why they had a cap of 40s, because they expected each planner to be almost like a concierge, to these clients. And they're going way above and beyond like basic portfolio management and financial planning. They're really, really like just moving heaven and earth for these clients. This is also why they then get this referral kind of, flywheel that allows them to feed that next gen and just keeps expanding. It's a really kind of beautiful thing. But the reason I bring that part up too is like, if you're thinking about, how do you succeed in all market conditions, billing on overall net worth is certainly, easier than billing on like just the investment accounts, which will naturally have more variance in total value. Like net worth means the value of their home, their business,
non-liquid and liquid,
all of the stuff, right? And they also have much less bias in how they give advice. If a client wants to buy a, $5 million vacation home, the advisor will just want to make sure, one, should they really do it? If it's okay that they have the capital, it's a totally financially responsible decision. They do it in the most efficient way possible because it's just part of the net worth. It's not like, oh, I don't want you to take that from my investment account where I'm charging an advisory fee. So I think there's like some interesting things that I always learn something new every year I do this. Like I hadn't met a firm that had quite this flywheel of young talent where they just kind of built a way that immediately addresses the sort of next gen talent shortage. Just give people direct access to 20 really great high net worth clients kind of out of the gates, and then a mechanism for them to grow and then multiply it, pay it forward. So their version of like a pay it forward senior advisor might be like a 28-year-old with 5 years experience. And they're now like the elder statesman helping feed the business of a 23, 24-year-old recent grad. So it's kind of fascinating. And then I think the billing structure was unique too. So I think there's a lot of things people can do, to be more prepared. Those are just a couple of them.
Yeah, when I hear you talk and we talk about the state of the market and what advisors can do, I think about, you mentioned me and my body being banged up from football, but I think about football. Because one thing, when you are playing this violent game, you have to have a process, and it has to almost be muscle memory, so that when you're dog tired in that fourth quarter or you're going to overtime, your body just knows what to do. And I think when the tide turns or the day of reckoning comes, as you mentioned, advisors are going to have to lean on that process to continue to operate their businesses. So if you're an advisor listening right now, pulling that out of, all your thoughts, I think your process is going to be important to lean into going into 2026. Make sure that you keep it simple, something that you can replicate, scale, right? And hopefully you're able to serve your clients with deep impact. So that was the first thing I got. And I think that when it's easy, you look over process, right? You're able to just lift the weight or run the ball, right? Or do the activity. But when it's hard, that is your saving grace. So very smart thoughts. I want to move on to the state of technology. Obviously, 2025 was the year of AI within our industry. So many new players, so much growth from a revenue perspective and employee headcount perspective for a lot of these companies on that Kits' map, right? What's your take on all of this? Is it going to continue to revolutionize our space? Are we just at the tip of the iceberg and there's more to come? How do you feel about it?
It's been a pretty exciting couple of years in technology broadly, largely because of AI, and people can be tired of hearing about it. But the reality is, you have in our space, right, in wealth technology, if you look at that sort of solutions map, there's certain companies that in 1 or 2 years have become larger in terms of their revenue and certainly their valuation than most of the companies built in the 10 years prior. And so I think that, and that trend's not slowing. Those companies are actually like accelerating their growth of users. They're able to charge pretty premium prices, so, if you look at like, I've heard people talk about this a bit, but if you look at like Jump and Zox as examples, like they're two of the best performing, kind of companies of 2025. They're charging, 2 to 3 times as much as like what people pay for CRM. They're paying 2 to 3 times as much as what people pay for financial planning. So these tools that are like been long stalwarts of like an advisor tech stack, new entrant comes in, the time to value is so much faster and more obvious that advisors aren't even balking at paying these premium prices, if you will, for those products. So it's really kind of interesting. Now, there's a bunch of interesting innovations that I can't say I know with, certainty how well they're doing financially, like, what's their user count. But I know those two companies are doing very well and growing fast, users, revenue, teams, et cetera. And we see the same thing like with our Hazel product. It's like in its first 10 weeks, it onboarded more customers than we did at the Altruist core business in 3 years.
Really?
It's like kind of bonkers. And it wasn't necessarily just a current Altruist customer signing up for Hazel. Roughly 50% of all Hazel customers we have no relationship with whatsoever. We've yet to spend any money on marketing. We have no growth marketing channels. We have no sales team. It's literally just a collection of engineers building a killer product. And I should give credit to Rob, who's been doing all the design work as well. But largely, it's a very technical, small group of people just building an absolutely killer product. The user count that we witness internally, the revenue of that particular product, again, it's probably bypassed 90% of the logos on that Kits map, and it did it in 10 weeks. Like, that's not normal. So again, IA has been this really interesting innovation. When I talk about time to value, what's particularly interesting here is that if you go and launch some new financial planning application today, just as an example, you're competing with dozens of companies, 2 or 3 that are pretty significant, been around for a long time. So there's a ton of inertia and switching cost. But if someone's never used an AI note taker and they use it for the first time, they realize in the very first meeting, they're like, this is way better than any notes I've ever taken before in my career. And then when they see it sync automatically to their CRM, they're like, oh yeah, I forget to do that all the time. I might take the notes, but I forget to add it to CRM. Well, now this happens automatically. And then they use the email feature for the first time. Client sends an email, or just let's just say the follow-up email. Just had the meeting, AI synthesizes it. Here's exactly what you need to, send out to your client. Advisor's like, mind blown. Never been able to do that as quickly as I have. Then the client responds back, has 2 or 3 questions. Hey, what was my RMD again for the year? If I haven't taken it, any chance you can get that ready for me? And then again, the AI just goes, hey, here's the exact answer for you. Just click send, right? Send goes off. The advisor's like, right? Like, so all of these things are just so fundamentally better than the advisors ever experienced before, which is why, I don't know how many there are, but let's say there's 1 million financial advisors across all the channels, out there. Even as much uptake as those early leaders have, like there's only probably been, 50,000, 60,000 seats sold. So there's still like 10x plus opportunity out in front of us because everybody's going to end up having these tools. They make you so much fundamentally better, and the tools will get better and better and better over time. So I think the biggest trend, like the most obvious thing is like, where has AI already shown its value? Now there's, again, a lot of areas that people are betting on, but again, the adoption's not there yet. Like, I don't know too many advisors that want AI managing their client portfolios. I don't know too many people that want AI to agentically and autonomously communicate back and forth. Like, in other words, they're not putting chat bots like on their client portal so that they can like interact with AI. So there's a lot of things where it's like, maybe that never happens, but there's people trying to build tools around that. There's obviously a bunch of like marketing automation AI. Some of those companies have really taken off. I think Finney in particular has had a pretty solid run this year. There's been some compliance tools. We publicly talked about it, at Altruist with Hazel. We've moved our entire compliance program basically onto the Hazel app, which is AI-powered compliance. So there's other kind of verticals too. But we'll see when you get like the broad adoption where it's like paraplanners, research agents, biz dev, corporate comms. Like there's a lot of additional surface area, but none have quite taken off like the note takers and general purpose assistants. Like they're probably 10x ahead of everybody else.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You named about 5 or so AI platforms or, companies that advisors could use today. And for that reason, a lot of advisors say they've been distracted with the amount of tools that are out there. While we talk about process and simplicity, what goes into the decision-making process with all of these new companies coming to market, right? It's like, that's cool, this is cool, and those 3 things over there are also cool. How do I choose what works for my business? Or how should I think about that so I can have a more process-oriented and simplified year to grow my firm?
If someone's a pure RIA, there's no limit on what they can use, right? Like they're only limited by their own imagination. That's pretty dangerous actually, because they could have they could spend way more time than they should analyzing tools when, the thing that actually helps them the most is going out and getting new clients, serving existing clients. Really everything else besides those 2 things is a distraction really to growing a successful business. Vetting, being like, I'm going to run a 1 month or 2 month experiment across 5 AI tools to pick the best one for my business. To use another Jarvis quote, that's playing office. Like that doesn't do anything positive, right? For like the firm or the clients. And in the end, there may be very little benefit. In other words, like there's no discovery they made in that 1 or 2 month, kind of trial that created any type of real meaningful differentiation in the vendors that they selected. So I think there's a real challenge, right, for the independent RIA. If someone's part of a platform business, so you're introducing like a broker dealer, LPL, whatever, like, right, they're going to already, I'm not going to say they're vetting these tools. Vetting basically means, are you, like SOC 2 type 2 compliant? Yes. Okay. How much rev share will you give us? Right. And like, that's, so when someone gets their enterprise, license with a big broker dealer network, it just means they've agreed to pay the broker dealer a chunk of the revenue to be one of the exclusive vendors on the list. Doesn't mean it's a great tool, but look, hey, less analysis paralysis. You want an AI note taker? You're going to have one option, right? And that's the one you get, just like you probably had only one or two financial planning options and probably very few options in other things, asset managers, et cetera, et cetera. Like they're curating the list because, they're taking a little bit of the revenue from the vendors that they give access to their distribution. So that might actually be better for a lot of people. Like if someone just said, hey, for better or worse, even if the tool I'm using is the number 2 tool in the market versus the number 1 tool or whatever, the fact I didn't have to spend 2 months, vetting it and testing it, probably is far more valuable than like whatever incremental difference was in those two products. So it's definitely a challenge. And again, I've always been a less is more kind of person. My bias, of course, would say if you just work with Altruist, we sort of solve that problem for you. One could use Altruist and have custody, portfolio management and accounting, trading, rebalancing, performance reporting, client mobile app, fee billing. It's all just done, right? They didn't have to do a whole lot of thinking, and it's way more efficient, costs less, unified. And then with AI, right, they can just plug into Hazel. Hazel's deeply integrated into the Altruist custodial data. So kind of N of one, kind of feature for an AI product. How many people will do that? I mean, based on our numbers, sounds like 1,000 or so, will be like, I'm just going to go all in. I don't want to monkey with all this other stuff. I'm going to focus on my clients. I trust that Altruist will help us make that really good choice of great tech. But not everybody's going to do that, right? So I do think it's a struggle. If anything, it's kind of like, it's like managing your diet, right? You walk into like a grocery store and there's, 10,000 things you could buy. Probably should go in there with a list, and then stay disciplined to the list. Otherwise, if you're like me, I can't go in with like, hey, my wife sent me like, hey, can you pick up some eggs? I'm like, I'm going to get eggs and 7 other things because I can't help myself, right? And like advisors are probably the same way.
My line for that is less is more when less does more. Mm-hmm. And if you go into choosing your tech stack with that perspective, you'll be very selective and intentional about what you actually choose, and you'll try to calculate the value for what it does for your firm. Mm-hmm. I wanted to talk a little bit about Hazel. We had Gokul and Fernando here. Yeah. Phenomenal podcast. 2 geniuses. Yeah. Amazed by them. And they pretty much told a love story about how Gokul was like, this is the one, right? We have to like double down on this. Fernando and what his team are building is incredible. I wanted to get your side of the story. Like what kind of excited you about the product that they were building and deciding to bring it onto Altruist, and talk about the product and where it is now and where you expect it to be?
I love it when some of our more technical people get a little spotlight time. It helps really show, like the level of talent density, at a place like Altruist. So just extraordinary people. Early 2024 is when I recognized, I was just like, I think these kind of AI general assistant, note taker plus email plus calendar, plus maybe some, document search, like just some of the features that are possible. I was like, this is the future. The market's ready. Like I just could tell like this was, what's happened this year. I could kind of tell what's going to happen. And we'd already started building our internal team. We had data architecture in place. And I thought, let me just go see, I want to go talk to different founders. I was transparent. Like everybody I talked to, I would say, hey, look, we're either going to build or buy something in this space, and we'd love to have a chat. And most people were more than welcome to have a chat. And so I talked to quite a few, of the kind of first generation AI companies serving financial advisors and wealth managers. What really stood out about Fernando and Daniel, the 2 co-founders of Time, a lot of it was the product had some, I'll get into the product in a minute, which there was a lot of things I liked about the product. But it was the people first. I just think about, they're both 2-time YC-backed founders, Y Combinator, just, kind of conditions people to know what it takes to build great companies. It's hard to apply and get accepted. Then you go through the accelerator, then you launch a company, and to go back a second time and do it again, spoke to me a lot about like, hey, like they're pretty battle tested. They'd both worked on large scale technology platforms. So they both had spent time at Capital One. Again, really, really smart, both very technical. And so really liked the people at first, right? Like that was the first thing, was like, man, extraordinary people, great kind of pedigree for building meaningful technology. And then when I started looking at the product, I just was blown away by how much they had built basically as two people in a matter of a few months, like 4 to 5 months. And they were still really searching for product market fit. So a lot of times early you start building a lot of features and they wanted to see, well, let's just launch, 10 features into this AI platform and see which ones people are use. And this will help us decide which ones to kind of double down on, which things to sunset. And I love that kind of thinking, that very iterative, let's get an MVP to market, learn from market signal, remove the noise from decision-making. But it also showed the breadth that they were able to build. You want to do document parsing and, natural language queries, they were doing that. Note-taking, summaries, email management, calendar management. They even built a client portal where clients could interact and drop in documents securely and interact with the platform. So they actually had if you were to measure out the pure volume of features, they had way more than anybody. It wasn't even close actually. Now some of those features were pretty crude because they just were getting them to market fast to kind of learn. But I loved that curiosity and the fact that there was going to be we would learn a lot, kind of from even the small number of customers that they had. I also love that they were just 2 and then 1 part-time person to kind of help with some sales activities who we've since brought into Altruist as well. But this meant that they were doing founder-led sales and founder-led customer support. So if a ticket came in because something wasn't working right, they took the ticket, they did the bug ticket, they had to do the response, write the email back to the advisor. The breadth of knowledge was beyond product. It was also go to market, customer support, customer facing. It was getting very impressive. So, I just was very transparent and I said, hey, I love what you guys are doing. And, I have no doubt you could figure this out on your own and go for it. But I think we could go a lot farther together. And we have resources that will probably make your lives easier. We've got a captive market to sell into. We have a team that can, we can kind of augment each other's, kind of roadmaps to kind of get to a more refined version of the product faster. We had other disciplines they didn't have, product design, brand design, product marketing, sales teams, right? So we could just get there a lot faster together. And it didn't take long, and they were in. And so we moved quickly through kind of diligence, kind of closed on the acquisition, and then haven't skipped a beat. The team is a very autonomous rocket ship, basically. They operate like a startup with 6 or 7 people. We try to just get out of their way as much as possible. The last thing I want to do is have a larger company destroy all of the things we loved about time. Yeah. We want to just kind of amplify it by giving them some additional resources and distribution firepower. So that's the scoop from my perspective. I mean, since then, of course, I can't possibly spend time on every single thing that we do here at Altruist, but I spend quite a bit of time on Hazel and AI products in general.
That's amazing. And personally, I love when 2 stories match. They were in love with Altruist and you were in love with them and we made it happen, right? That's like a perfect love story. So it's a beautiful thing. Fernando, I mean, I'm from San Francisco, went to high school there, played football there, stayed in the Bay Area, went to Berkeley, as most of the advisors that are watching know. And YC is the pinnacle of success in the startup world. And when Fernando sat in the seat that you were sitting at and said, I did it twice. Yeah. I'm like, let me just start kneeling to you right now because that is next level.
It's a pinnacle early signal of future success, right? Sure. I mean, it's one of those things where, it's not a guarantee, but man, your odds go up a lot, if you go through that program. There's a reason why it's a coveted program to be part of. So yeah, man. And then what's coming down the pipe, man, I mean, we're pretty close to launching. In fact, maybe by the time people hear this, it may be already out in market, but we're making a pretty big change to the home screen. Mm-hmm. What we've learned from advisors using the product is the number one thing that people power users use. We had it kind of buried in the sidebar, but we called it Ask Hazel. But basically it just was the natural language chat, right? If you launch Gemini, if you launch ChatGPT, if you launch Anthropic, Claude, they all, instead of taking you to some dashboard, a bunch of widgets, they just take you to a very clean screen that just says what do you want me to help you with today? And with that, you can interact with whatever data is connected to your system. So a lot of people don't realize that Hazel can fully replace a third-party foundation model. It's already built with the same amount of depth to do deep research, meaning it uses these other foundation models, but it's already tuned for our industry. So if you've ever used ChatGPT and you're like, oh man, it kind of hallucinates every now and again, or, why can't it do certain things with data that I would hope it could do with data? Those things can largely be addressed by context, kind of the framing that you build behind the scenes into, the prompts that you don't even have to ask the prompt. It's like already there, expands every prompt automatically, giving it the context. So the model can be a little bit more bespoke and powerful for our needs. And then if it's connected to certain data, we can kind of prioritize the data that it uses to give you responses back. So like we can connect the Altruist data, we can connect obviously the advisor's email, their CRM, their notes, their documents. And this is stuff that like a generic LLM out of the box doesn't have any of that context. So now when you're asking it questions, it knows that you're an advisor. It knows the importance of like the efficacy and quality of the answers. It knows all of the other data in your firm. And so one of the things that will be happening again is like this will just become the front and center primary point of interaction is like this really clean, like just anything you want Hazel to help you with, just start there. You can add documents. You can, drop in spreadsheets. You can drop in PNG, like pictures of image, like it will parse anything and just, use that plus other context to give you answers. We should fairly soon be launching our paraplanner agent, which is designed again to do a lot of the financial planning and financial planning assistant work that an advisor might pay someone to do. And I've already seen a lot of I get the early previews of things. I don't want to give away the farm, but you'll be able to build like usable, beautiful, privately branded financial plans like directly in Hazel. So we're not building it to necessarily replace financial planning, but there's a lot of like lightweight, simple stuff where you could say, hey, listen, I've got a client coming in for a meeting. I don't want to do a huge, big financial plan in a financial planning application, but I want to run the following, 4 or 5 scenarios. And like building like a beautiful branded 2-page, financial plan with rich graphics, all branded again for that firm. Just to get a couple prompts, sidebar will pop open, develop the plan. You can then go in, query it back. Hey, I love that, but change this. No problem. Change this. Boom. Good to go. And generated. Never having to put data in anything. It already has so much context and data from everything that you've done with that prospect, your meetings, your transcriptions, your emails, et cetera. So I've seen a lot of people, they're trying to build like, hey, go get this data and then integrate it with this other tool so that I can run plans more seamlessly. I think that's okay. Mm-hmm. But I think even better is that the ad hoc planning that is, probably 80% of what most people want and need on a regular basis, condensed down to like really rich, simple, like 1 or 2 page plans. That'll just be like easily done with Hazel and so much more again. But this is like kind of planning like stuff. It'd be similar to like if you had, again, a great, 140, 150 IQ person in your office and you could just ask them anything you want. Hey, build a quick 2-page plan for, my client. Here's a few little bits of context and here's the things I'm trying to solve for. And they can give you the answer and do it in like 2 or 3 seconds. Yeah. Like Hazel will be doing that kind of stuff like really soon.
Amazing. Jason, you know what I miss about you sitting across the table? You just gave me a phrase that I'm going to use at my house. You said, hey, I don't want to give away the farm. Like I'm going to use that in my household. You had these phrases, I would take them back to
I'm from the Midwest.
That's what I'm saying. The Michigan is just coming out. I don't want to give away the farm. I bought you guys Christmas presents, but I don't want to give away the farm. I'm not going to tell you. But one of the things you're saying that is exactly what Go Cool said. He said, Hazel allows advisors to interact with their data better than any other platform. And I think that's a really exciting thing for advisors to buy back their time, operate more efficiently, and serve more clients. I think it's going to be tremendous. I wanted you to, before we close, just talk to the advisors about like what could they look forward to? I mean, you talked about Hazel, but the commitment to Altruist and everything that we're going to do in 2026, because I know that there's a lot of exciting stuff. Advisors here, Go Cool, Fernando talk, Mazi come onto the podcast, guests like Ami Shah rave about the data that she's found and why Altruist is just such a good partner for her business. And I just think this is a good time for you to tell advisors personally, like what we're going to do for them and how we plan on, keeping our commitment as long as we're around, right, to help them be better practitioners and grow better businesses.
The mission hasn't really changed in 7 years. I mean, we started the company, make financial advice better, make it more affordable, make it accessible to everyone. That's not a 1-year project or a 2-year. I mean, it's a multiple decades thing to be able to kind of tackle all that. we took that mission, we turned it into a flywheel where we said, okay, well, here's some of the things we have to deliver on in order to like reach this mission. So how can we provide advisors 10x plus value? So return on kind of their time or on their capital. How can we also provide their clients 150 basis points or better annualized benefit in terms of like better outcomes in how their money compounds? Can we drive the highest satisfaction in the industry, like by probably an order of magnitude higher satisfaction? If we do that, then we should feel pretty confident we're going to drive a lot more assets onto the platform, which will give us the scale to invest more in innovation that provides even more 10x opportunities for the advisors, even bigger outcomes for their clients, higher satisfaction, loyalty, more assets, and right, the wheel spins and spins.
Correct.
And so, everything that we do is in that effort and doesn't really change, year by year. But building, a wealth platform, people will hear me start talking a lot more. The original plan for Altruist was always be a wealth platform business. Over the years, like we've sort of been, the term custodian gets brought up a lot. And it's like, yes, custodian is a big part. It's the core, right? So you think about, a platform business, there's layers in these platforms, and the base layer in our case is a self-clearing custodian that's super modern, collection of APIs that allows it to work in real time and sync across, account opening and money movement and asset management, and all these different layers really seamlessly and elegantly work together. We've then built a number of layers on top of that. So there's sort of like a, operating system layer, which is like performance reporting, fee billing, team management, benchmarks, or like all of that kind of operating, software. Hazel brings an intelligence layer, right? So that now it's able to interact with all of that data that lives inside of that ecosystem. Now, any one of those things is hard. Like these are like entire companies that just do one of those layers. We're like doing multiple layers here. So it's extremely challenging. And as far as like what's coming next year, I think at that core layer, you'll see a lot of continued innovation. So we'll be launching account types that, will kind of complete the list of accounts we can support. We'll be launching margin, options trading, alternative assets, right? So like some of the final touches on the custody layer, I'm not going to say it's ever complete, but it'll be 99% parity, but all digital and super efficient compared to any other custodial platform. And the operating system layer, we're going to add more, especially tax management features. So asset location, which will make like household level rebalancing, like one click or fully automated easy. This will enable even more tax benefits to things like direct indexing or personalized indexing. Speaking of, we'll much more deeply personalize, individual stock investing. AI will be integrated into virtually every layer of this. So although Hazel will always be this intelligence layer that you can use separately, you'll start to see Hazel interjected basically all over the Altruist application. This will allow advisors to do more at a much lower cost and do better than they ever did before. What does that all mean? Well, that then allows you to make advice better, make it more affordable, make it more accessible, right? So all these things, they sometimes, like even internally, the team might think I've lost my marbles when it's like, hey, we're going to do this thing or this thing. It's like, but we're building again a platform. The platform is very vast and diverse. And so I'm pretty excited about kind of the innovations there. We'll be making some cool announcements in probably the middle of the year around ways advisors can partner with Altruist. We want to kind of build like an end-to-end ecosystem for advisors. So we are the easiest possible place for an independent advisor that wants to work on a fiduciary to launch, scale, and then even eventually exit their firm. So that whole life cycle, make it really easy, no matter where they are kind of in their journey, to kind of jump in, build scale, again, when appropriate, exit to like a great buyer that's actually on Altruist already and knows how the platform works and can easily kind of provide continuity to the thousands of advisors, here. So, we have a lot going on, as always, and, we're always trying to do a little bit better, than we did the day before. And, no guarantees on exactly when we're, done. I don't know, probably never really, because there's just much to be done. But I am, pretty confident that, this year will probably be the pivotal year where, anyone who in the past has said, oh, I love Altruist, but you're missing this one thing I really need, which totally fair. And we got that. Like if I use margin, and Altruist doesn't have margin, kind of might be a deal killer, right? So those things will be basically gone in 2026. And at that point, it'll be really interesting, like the advisor community more broadly, it'll just be a choice. Do they want what's best for their clients or the best for their business, or are they going to let inertia win? Hey, it's just easier to do nothing. I'm fine. The market's been so good and cushy the last 15 years. I have no impetus to make improvements. Many people will choose inertia. Someday they'll regret that probably. But I think many people will also say, I'm just like in a constant state of improvement. I'm going to make the leap. And now is the time. I think Altruist going to have a monster year next year.
Amazing. It will have a monster year next year. And to your point about being done serving, you're never done until it's done. You're just always improving. Yeah. And I think that's exactly what we're doing here. Thank you so much, Jason, for coming and spending some time with me. And thank all of you advisors for watching this podcast, for being the lifeblood of the business that we call Altruist. You are Altruist. It's been an amazing 2025. We'll see you again here in 2026. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you for listening to The Advisor Journey by Altruist. Brokerage-related products and services are provided by Altruist Financial LLC, a member of FINRA/SIPC. Results may vary. Altruist and its affiliates do not provide tax or legal advice.